What's your name?
So what's going to happen if I don't give you my name?
Then you can be under arrest.
If you are going to threaten us with physical violence, you better make sure you're willing to go all the way, because I am.
The way the law works is if the law doesn't say you can't do it, then you can do it.
If you want to lock people up for not breaking laws,
all men are created equal is the idea that if it is wrong for one man to commit an act, it is wrong for all men to commit that act. Too often, members of our government exclude themselves from the ranks of equal men referenced by Thomas Jefferson when he said, exclude themselves.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Craig Henry live stream. In today's live, we are going to be discussing a session of the House of Representatives in the state of Indiana in which they passed a bill aimed at taking our freedoms. And it's aimed particularly at stopping First Amendment auditors. I want to demonstrate some proof before we get into the meat of the video, but check this out really quickly.
Intent for public buildings is we had these First Amendment auditors coming in, is what they called themselves, but they're really trespassing on private property. They're going past restricted access areas, behind locked doors, interrupting business inside of buildings.
Now, I don't even want to have to get into that right now, but this is the video that we're going to have to watch. Now, I want to tell you guys that just like the thumbnail of this video suggests, every law that is passed by definition is restrictive of our liberties, right? Because you can't possibly make a new law with new restrictions on any act without restricting liberties, right? So we're going to get into it. I've prepared a little video with an intro, and then we're going to show you the session in which these people pass the bill, and then we're going to talk about it. Let's get right into it here.
Law enforcement removed somebody there and hit him with trespass charges. Was actually convicted, but then on the appeal, the defendant's claim was that the law enforcement officer was not an agent of the property. During the appellate court decision, they essentially, in that opinion, all but ask us to change that law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Prescott, why is this bill necessary?
So,
shouldn't taxpayers have that right to go to government meetings and question? And I don't think it'd be disruptive, but shouldn't they have that right?
Absolutely, taxpayers should have that right to show up at meetings, but they have to be so civilly. We need to.
House Bill 1338. Chair recognizes Representative Prescott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House. House Bill 1338. A couple years ago, my local elected officials reached out, let me know about a problem that they were having with individuals showing up, disrupting public meetings. I encouraged them to adopt a set of rules of decorum, kind of like what we have down here. So they did so after that first meeting. After adopting their rules of decorum, chaos kind of broke out during that first meeting. They were having trouble enforcing them. Law enforcement wasn't quite sure how to handle it at the time in the meeting as well. And consulting with Association of Counties, AIM, other bodies down here, this seems to be a growing problem around the state and around the nation, quite frankly. So that's kind of why we put this bill together. If a governing body allows attendees to speak at a topic in a meeting, or a governing body may designate for a period of time the public testimony that is before or during the governing body's discussion or consideration of the topic, and before the governing body takes final action on the topic, they can address the amount of time allocated for attendees to speak. The governing body may adopt reasonable rules of policies governing the conduct of a meeting, including reasonable restrictions on the time allotted to attendees to speak on the topic. To maintain order, they have to adopt a policy for the presiding officer to enforce these rules of decorum. If somebody violates the rules of decorum, they get a verbal warning. If they continue to violate the rules of decorum, they get a second verbal warning. On the third offense, the presiding officer may ask the attendee to leave. If the attendee...
All right, so I don't want to start talking too much, but check this out. What he has just said is, if they let you speak, if they allow you to speak, that was the language he used. If they allow you to speak, then you have to abide by certain rules of decorum that is to be imposed and implemented by the council or by the presiding officer in the meeting. So essentially what they're doing is they're allowing every separate legislature to dictate what is allowable speech or what is allowable within governing meetings. Now, if that means they don't allow any questions that could be difficult, if that means they don't allow any speech that could be considered dissent, then that's what that's going to be. But that's not all. Let's continue on.
Refuses to leave, at that point, the presiding officer could direct law enforcement to remove the attendee. Nothing in the section prohibits the law enforcement officers from immediately removing an individual if a criminal act is committed, or if removal of the attendee is necessary to maintain public order. On page 2, line 31, that code site that's referenced is actually our Indiana tort claim law, which is our version of qualified immunity, to make sure that public employees and law enforcement officers are protected under a qualified immunity statute. The second section of the bill, it was originally drafted to just deal with public buildings, but we did open that up to all buildings or all property. The reason for the original intent for public buildings is we had these First Amendment auditors coming in, is what they called themselves, but they were really trespassing on private property. They were going past restricted access areas, behind locked doors, interrupting business inside of buildings. So the reason for our changes in the trespass laws for this, there was a situation where in Vincennes, there was property where the owner had asked law enforcement to send extra patrols because he was having problems.
By the way, I just called the property owner that he's talking about. He doesn't have any recollection of asking law enforcement to remove somebody at the time in that particular case. Now I want to get into that conversation that I had with him just a few minutes ago. I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes, but let's continue hearing what he has to say.
Problems with people trespassing in a restricted access area. It was actually a loading dock. Law enforcement removed somebody there and hit him with trespass charges. Was actually convicted, but then on the appeal, the defendant's claim was that the law enforcement officer was not an agent of the property. And during the appellate court decision, reading the opinion, they said that there are situations where it would be in the best interest to have law enforcement remove them, but they're not the General Assembly. They could not change the law. So they essentially, in that opinion, all but ask us to change that law. So we did that by saying if someone knowingly or intentionally enters or refuses to leave an area of a property that is marked restricted, enters or refuses to leave an area of a property that's designated as employee or authorization personnel only, or enters or refuses to leave an area of a property that is locked or otherwise not accessible to public without permission or prior authorization, that they'd be subject to Class A.
Okay, so I want to stop there and talk about what he has said, because he's completely just made it very confusing. So what he's done is he's cited a case, and I want to actually bring that case to you. We've got this case here. This case is Marion Young versus State of Indiana. All right. So, and this is the appellate court decision. So this is what the appellate court said, and this is what he was referencing when he said they all but asked them to reverse or to rewrite the statute. Now, I'm going to zoom in here just so that we can all see it. Make sure we can all see it good. Well, not too much. Jeez, oh. All right. I've just given up on that. All right. Accordingly, even if we consider only the evidence that favors the trial court's judgment and all reasonable inferences that can be drawn from this evidence, there was simply no evidence presented that establishes that Captain Hensley, the arresting officer, or that any other VPD officer was an agent of RCS, as that term is defined by the relevant statute. Because there was no evidence that Young was asked to leave RCS property by either the owner of that property or an agent of that property, the state did not prove one of the essential elements of criminal trespass. And they're saying that because they never actually called this property owner in this case and asked him, hey, Did you actually ask the cops to trespass anybody that was on your property after hours? And, or at least, they never called him and asked him that, because I don't think that he did. And the reason I don't think that he did is because I just called him on the phone and talked to him for about 10 minutes. And he told me himself that he doesn't remember doing that. Right. He told me that he has had problems recently on that property that Representative Prescott, the dishonorable Representative Prescott, was referring to. But he hasn't told me that he explicitly called law enforcement and asked them to trespass anybody who was on his property after hours, or at least not at that time. He's told me since then he has put up no trespassing signs so that people can be charged with trespass. But at the time, they couldn't do it. So in essence, all that's happened is the cop came up to somebody, wanted to bother him. They couldn't get their ID. That is what happened. I read the case text. They couldn't get the ID. And so they arrested him for criminal trespass. And then they claimed in court that the owner had told him to do that, but they never asked the owner to come to the stand and testify, because I don't think that he did ask him to do that. I think the cop was lying. Of course, that is just speculation. The only evidence that I have to back that up is the recorded phone call, the property owner saying that he doesn't recall saying that. But I want to continue on with the case text, because this is pretty crazy what the appellate court does actually say in this thing. Because we recognize that our holding today may seem to place an impractical burden on police officers. Of course, that's ridiculous. That shows how biased the courts are to police officers, because the police officers never asked to trespass this guy. We recognize that our holding today that the property owner has to ask for somebody to be trespassed from private property might be burdensome to any bully cop who wants to bully somebody on private property. Obviously, the state has an interest in keeping unwanted persons from occupying or using the land of a third party without that property owner's consent. At least there has to be a little evidence of that, right? And in this case, there wasn't really, at least not that I can see, and not that they showed in the trial court or in the appellate court. We can envision scenarios in which it is difficult or impractical to summon the property owner or the property owner's agent to instruct an obviously unwelcome person from a property. Yet it is not our role to rewrite the criminal trespass statute to reflect what we believe to be better public policy. That role belongs to the General Assembly. Our role is to apply the statute as written and look to the language of the charging information to determine whether the state has proven the necessary elements of criminal trespass. All right. And then they conclude that the state didn't. And then they say on this last line that I'm highlighting, we therefore reverse Young's conviction. Okay. But what in the line before, in the paragraph before, the court really can't think of any other way, right? There's a lot of places that say, there's a lot of parking areas that say no parking past X time. No, or parks. A lot of parks say no trespassing after dark or past a certain time. But the court cannot envisage a private property putting that kind of a sign up on their property, which the property owner has now done, right? The property owner has now put a no trespassing after hours on that fence around where the people were. So what that's saying to me is that the court is really just trying to create a controversy where none really exists. The property owner took care of the issue, right? But let's go on. I'm going to continue showing you all the session in which this J.D. Prescott, this guy here on the screen, is attempting to rewrite the already existing laws in an attack on First Amendment auditors. So this is it.
Misdemeanor for trespass. With that, that's the intent of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Prescott, why is this bill necessary?
So without this legislation, the only thing that our locals have to use to enforce their rules of decorum is opinions by our public access counselor, Luke Britt. So really what we're doing was we're codifying what Luke Britt has given in his.
By the way, if somebody's being disorderly at a public meeting, disorderly conduct already exists. This is a new law to take away more freedoms.
Opinions to enforce rules of decorum at local meetings.
Shouldn't taxpayers have that right to go to government meetings and question? And I don't think it'd be disruptive, but shouldn't they have that right?
Absolutely, taxpayers should have that right to show up at meetings, but they have to be so civilly. We need to, just like we're conducting business here today, right? We have rules of decorum, how we conduct business as a body, how we conduct business in our committee meetings as well. So yes, I want to make sure that everybody's First Amendment right is protected. And really what we have happening in Winchester, for example, where this, where the request came for this legislation, you have average everyday constituents that are being shut out from public meetings because a select few individuals interrupt, disrupt, and have to adjourn early or just get the other individuals completely out of order, to where there's constituents that don't feel comfortable being at the meetings because of the way some of these individuals are acting. So the balance I'm trying to find here is, when does person A's First Amendment rights start to violate person B's First Amendment rights? We want to make sure everybody's treated equally under the law and can show up, air their grievances to the public, but we just want to do so in an orderly, respectful fashion.
Okay, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. My fear is an elected person gets asked uncomfortable questions, and I think a lot of times questions are uncomfortable, but if you're an elected official, you should be able to handle that. And this bill kind of scares me from that perspective. I see where you're going, but let me think about how I'm gonna vote. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Porter, speak on the bill.
Yeah, and that's actually what this bill is going to be used for. This is what I'm going to predict. This is what's going to happen, as a matter of fact. The local elected officials will use this bill as an excuse to quash any dissent. So any criticism of them, just or unjust, which is still our First Amendment right. And they'll use it, and they'll be boisterous about it, and they will use it to chill and to arrest people for exercising their freedoms. And so the House of Representatives, and the individual that questioned the Representative Prescott, was absolutely in the right for doing so. This smells. I smell a rat, and I think the rat is Mr. Prescott.
The bill. Your author yield. He yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I apologize, Representative Prescott. I hold you in high regard, and had I gone into the bill in more depth early, I would have gotten a hold of you ahead of time. But my concern is, having served as a mayor, I know at times we would have individuals that would show up and get, a little rowdy, but not radically so. But one of the concerns that I have was some of those, I think, that have been asked before. Again, I just want to make sure that people who come and may just have just a disagreement with, whether it be a city council or county council meeting or whatever, that it's not taking away any of their rights to come and ask the questions and so forth that they normally would be able to do under normal circumstances.
Yeah, so this bill would not prohibit anybody from coming and asking questions. They could still do that. The local units of government would be responsible for adopting their rules of decorum, and they would do so with their legal counsel. I want to make sure nobody's First Amendment rights are violated. We want to make sure that civil discussions being had. That's all we're doing here.
So look at this as removing any freedoms that people have had, as long as they are basically acting with decency in the meetings.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Appreciate that.
Further discussion on the bill. Chair sees none. Would the author like to close? He waives it. Questions on final pass of the bill. Machine is open. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no.
So they're voting at this point. As you can see, all the yeses showing up on the screen. That's all the people that hate freedom in our government. And of course, all the no's probably just hate the Republican. They probably just hate the people that are voting yes. So this is what you get with government, though, right? Every bill that they pass usually grants themselves more power and restricts your freedom. And
while the members voted, tally the roll. Roll call shows 78 ayes, 79 ayes, 17 noes. The bill has passed. Now, the title of the bill remain the title of the act. Court shall inform the Senate of the passage of the bill. Senate sponsors, Senators Rotz and Alexander. Consent to take committee reports out of order. Chair seeks consent to take committee reports en masse. Chair hands down the following committee reports for adoption. House Bill 1132, House Bill 1194, House Bill 1412.
All right, so that is the end of that. But as you can see, I mean, they passed this with no questions asked. They don't care about your rights. They just want to make sure that they appease everybody else in the government. So, but now I want to move on. I want to bring to your attention that this is the reason why this stuff is being perpetrated, the reason why these new laws to restrict your rights are being perpetrated. And so we'll
but going forward, we got a system that's good.
So Matt writes tickets for it. So another thing
Yeah, that's why he extorts everybody for it. They gotta pay. They gotta pay something. Excuse me, sir. I'll comment whatever the hell I want. Yeah, I will.
I'm warning you once.
What? What are you gonna do?
He's
bringing into action.
Be quiet. Don't shoot me all you want. I'm going to warn you one time.
I'm not going to shoot you, sir.
One time. Don't talk.
Go on with your meeting.
Got rules of conduct, and one of them is not.
I'm not disrupting you.
And not putting other people.
I'm not disrupting you.
So he says in this meeting, one of the rules of conduct is not intimidation or putting people down. And that's because I called somebody I told them that the town cop extorts people. But this is the same individual, James J. Southwood, right here.
I'm not going to get
in another meeting, right? The individual on the far right here is Jay Southwood. He's on the far right, on the far end of the table. He is going to call a local business extortionist, but of course it's okay when he does it, but not when somebody else does it. And this is the reason that House Bill 1338 is ridiculous, just like most laws that the government will pass.
In words with you, I'm just giving my opinion. I think we should just let this thing go and you do whatever you want to do. But I'm just one of four, and I'm just giving you my opinion because I'm just telling you right out, straight out, in this whole audience. I think you're trying to extort the town of Shelburne, and I don't approve of it. That's how I feel, and that's how I'm going to go with this. So that's my say.
So that's my say. So he's allowed to call people extortionists by saying that they extort the town, but I'm not allowed to say that the town cop extorts the town. And this is why House Bill 1338 is unacceptable, most likely unconstitutional. But of course, the Constitution doesn't protect most people's freedoms. But anyways, then we want to get into the second part of the bill in which Representative Prescott outlines the intent that he has with this bill. And that intent is to stop First Amendment auditors from being able to operate. Now, I'm going to have to get into that video again, and I'll bring it up for you so that we can listen to it again, just for anybody joining the live stream at this point. So here we go. We found it.
Then on the
All right.
appeal, the defendant's claim was that the law enforcement officer was not an agent of the property. Reason for the original intent for public buildings is we had these First Amendment auditors coming in, is what they called themselves, but they were really trespassing on private property. They were going past restricted access areas, behind locked doors, interrupting business inside of buildings. So the reason for our changes in the trespass laws for this, there was a situation where.
All right, so he's lying, right? So I can't speak for all First Amendment auditors, but when he says that because in Indiana we were mostly the people going into the public buildings and recording, and he's saying that once we cross a threshold in a public building, it then becomes private property. So this is just a misunderstanding of the law from Representative Prescott, but this won't stop them, right? And it won't stop the courts from enforcing it arbitrarily, absent any evaluation of constitutionality, because this is what they do, especially with anybody who annoys this state. If anybody actually thinks we have a First Amendment right in America, it's interesting to look back at any case of protest against war, right? When the country's at war and somebody speaks out against the war, they say, oh, we don't think this war is just, or maybe young men shouldn't participate in the war. And they go and they advocate for young men to stop participating in the war. Most of the time, those people are arrested, and even all the way up to the Supreme Court, their convictions are upheld when it comes to the Sedition Act or, anything of this nature. So, guys, I just wanted to leave you with this. It looks like we're coming to around 30 minutes just now. But before we go, I do want to say that the whole reason for this is because the government is constantly trying to gather more information on you while constantly trying to limit the amount of information that you can gather on them. That is the intent of this bill. That is my conclusion. I'd like to know your conclusion. Why don't you leave it in the comment section below of this video, not in the live stream, but in the comment section. And leave a like if you think that this is interesting, if you like today's content. If you just get to the stream, go back and rewatch it. Thank you for everybody joining us. Thank you for all the attention brought. And let's make a difference. Let's make a difference with these people. Let's show them that when you make bills or when you make these arbitrary laws restricting our liberties, we will challenge them, both in courts and in just real life, saying, look, we're not going to follow these unjust laws. So y'all have a good day, and we will see you in the next one.